Hi everyone, we are the Diastolics. We're making an informative video on how blood pressure works. So let's do a rundown on how our lesson is going to go. So this is our overview. First, we will define blood pressure. Then, we will talk about the factors affecting blood pressure. Then, how to regulate blood pressure, the pathology of hypertension, and the discussion questions.
So let's define blood pressure. Blood pressure is defined as the pressure that our blood exerts against endothelial walls, measured in millimeters in mercury as a major arterial system in the body, and is separated into systolic and diastolic pressures.
Systolic pressure is the maximum blood pressure during ventricular contraction, which indicates the amount of pressure in the brachial artery when it's under maximum pressure from the cuff squeezing your blood vessel when your heart contracts, also known as ventricular systole, pushing blood from the heart to the body.
Now, diastolic pressure is recorded just before the next contraction, and it's the lower number, which indicates how much pressure is within the artery while it's in the relaxation phase. And during the phase, the heart is refilling with blood. This is when the blood vessel is relaxed and dilated, or in other words, open, and it results in decreased pressure within the walls of the blood vessel.
Blood pressure is always read in the pair of diastolic and systolic pressure. So if someone has a reading of 120/60 millimeters mercury, it means to have a systolic pressure of 120 millimeters mercury and diastolic pressure of 60 millimeters mercury. Not too long ago, doctors used mercury sphygmomanometers. They help measure pressure within a glass-filled tube filled with mercury. Hence the measurement being millimeters of mercury. This is because mercury is really dense. It doesn't stick to the reading tubes, and therefore allows for more accurate readings.
So there are physiological factors that control blood pressure, and there are also modifiable and non-modifiable factors that affect it as well.
Physiological factors include cardiac output, vascular resistance, heart rate, stroke volume, venous return, baroreceptors, hormones, and the kidneys.
Think of two glasses connected by a straw. Fluid moves only when there's a pressure difference. Blood works the same way. It moves from areas of high pressure to low pressure. Our arteries are high pressure systems, and our veins are low pressure systems.
So what controls that pressure?
Blood pressure depends mainly on cardiac output, which is just your heart rate multiplied your stroke volume, as well as vascular resistance. If the heart pumps more blood or vessels constrict, blood pressure rises.
Venous return, or blood flowing back to the heart, is helped by venous valves, skeletal muscle contractions, breathing, and the sympathetic nervous system.
So you talked about blood vessels, and we also know them as baroreceptors. How do they work?
The baroreceptors are stretch receptors located in the carotid sinuses and the aortic arch. When blood pressure drops, they signal the medulla to increase heart rate and cause vasoconstriction. When blood pressure rises, they reduce sympathetic output. This is the baroreflex.
Hormones also regulate blood pressure. Epinephrine and norepinephrine increase heart rate and vasoconstriction. The kidneys regulate long-term blood pressure by adjusting the blood volume through water and sodium balance. Antidiuretic hormone increases water retention, which raises blood pressure, while atrionatriuretic peptide promotes water excretion, which lowers blood pressure.
So all of that is the short-term and long-term physiological control, right?
Exactly, but blood pressure is also affected by non-modifiable factors like age and sex. Aging causes arterial stiffening and reduced baroreflex sensitivity, which increases hypertension risk.
So according to research, women tend to have higher blood pressure than men. Why do we think this happens?
Okay, so now that we've covered our short-term and long-term physiological control, And we talked about our non-modifiable factors. What about our modifiable factors?
Diet, exercise, sodium intake, body weight, and access to healthcare all matter. Eating potassium-rich foods like bananas, reducing sodium, staying active, and maintaining a healthy weight can help lower blood pressure. This is because sodium retains itself in water, expanding the extracellular volume and releasing substances that contract the heart and blood vessels and affects the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. However, potassium lowers sodium by excretion through urination and relaxes vascular smooth muscle, which decreases peripheral resistance.
Let's go back to the basics of our course. When skeletal muscle is activated, it releases potassium into the interstitial space near the arterioles. This stimulates the sodium-potassium pump in smooth muscle cells, which leads to being hyperpolarized and also reduces a calcium influx into the smooth muscle. This results in dilation, which, as we know, reduces blood pressure.
So blood pressure is controlled by the heart, blood vessels, nerves, hormones, kidneys, and lifestyle.
Exactly. It's a constant balance between pressure, volume, resistance, and regulation.
Hypertension? My grandma had that.
Hypertension is a chronic condition where blood pressure is consistently above 130/80 millimeters mercury. Most cases, about 85 to 95%, are primary hypertension, meaning there isn't one single identifiable cause. It's multifactorial. On the other hand, secondary hypertension has one or two identifiable causes and is more straightforward, though it is the minority of hypertension cases.
As mentioned before, the factors affecting blood pressure also contribute to the causes of primary hypertension, such as age, because blood vessels thicken with age. As a result, blood pressure also rises. Lifestyle habits like high sodium diets, lack of exercise, high stress, substance use, and medications all contribute to hypertension. And finally, social economic factors, such as healthcare, job stressors, income, and education.
Recall that hypertension develops due to increases in cardiac output, vascular resistance, stroke volume, and extracellular volume. So what is contributing to these four factors, which also lead to the causes of secondary hypertension? Well, we wanted to focus on the three main dysfunctions, which are RAAS overactivation, sodium water retention, and baryoreflex desensitivity.
If we recall from Module 3 that aldosterone and angiotensin II cause long-term and short-term effects on blood pressure, and they both increase blood pressure. When the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system becomes overstimulated from the sympathetic nervous system, it leads to exacerbated vasoconstriction, worsening kidney functions. This then creates a very vicious cardiac cycle, disrupting systemic functions such as overloading the baroreceptor sensitivity, thus leading to hypertension. Sodium and water retention.
Aldosterone increases in secretions which impact sodium volume by reabsorbing it, which causes increased extracellular volume. This expansion in extracellular volume also leads to edema, which increases cardiac output. As a result, it causes peripheral tissues to constrict, thus also increasing blood pressure.
The elements of the baryoreflex. First, we have the receptors. The barioreceptors, are located within the carotid sinus, as well as the aortic arch, and they detect stretch from raising blood pressure. Now, the afferent pathway. Signals travel via the glossopharyngeal nerve, as well as the vagus nerve to the brainstem. And eventually, when it reaches the medulla, the cardiovascular center, this is where the signal gets processed. After that, the efferent fibers, they send out either a sympathetic output or a parasympathetic output. Finally, the cause, heart rate decreases, contractility decreases, the blood vessels end up vasodilating, and the kidneys reduce renin release. Overall, what happens is blood pressure decreases.
So what happens in hypertension?
Well, in chronic hypertension, the baroreflex becomes less sensitive or it resets to a higher pressure. This means that the sympathetic system stays overactive, keeping the blood pressure elevated.
So, hypertension isn't just about salt or age. It must be a cascade of interactions amongst multiple organ systems.
Exactly. It's a complex imbalance between cardiac output, vascular resistance, and regulatory systems that persist beyond normal regulatory control. And all of this is caused by factors such as the RAAS overactivation, sodium water retention, and baroreflex desensitivity. And all of that contributes to the various diseases, disorders, and dysfunctions.
So, a good discussion question to ask here is, why are women more likely to have higher blood pressure than men?
Now we'll move on to our second question. Well, we know now that the role of the baroreflex is to lower blood pressure. Well, why doesn't this happen, and why doesn't this fix chronic hypertension?
So that concludes our lesson on blood pressure. Thank you all for watching. We hope you learned something new, and we'll catch you on the next one.